In this video I will show you how I used a springboot actuator in my application. So springboot actuator is used to expose our application web endpoints like health, metrics, info, environmental, etc. So for this purpose we need to add one dependency. So let's copy the dependency called springboot starter actuator dependency. So I already created one application with some endpoints. So I already created one controller, employee controller, and I performed some CRUD operations. Now open a pom.xml file and add the dependency in the pom.xml file, springboot starter actuator. Now this is my application.properties file where I took the H2 database, which is a in-memory database. Okay, now let's relaunch our application is started. Now we got the one endpoint called actuator. Okay, localhost colon 8080/actuator. Now we got the response, but it's not in JSON format, so I need to install one Chrome extension JSON formatter. So now let's refresh. Now it's formatted nicely. Now we got some endpoints. Let's check for this health one. Now here you can see the status of our application up. Now we need much more endpoints like beans, mappings, HTTP trace, like all those endpoints. So for this we need to add one conditions in application.properties like management.endpoints .web exposure .include is equal to star means all the endpoints, like everything, and also show the details information about the health path. So now let's refresh. Now you can see that all those endpoints. Now let's open the health. Now you can see that detailed information about the health, like disk space and the database. You can see the amount of disk space total free. Okay, now let's check for another endpoint, beans. Here you can see Spring is created all those endpoints. Okay, let's check for our employee related beans. Search employee controller, you can see, and the employee service, and the scope is a singleton, and the dependencies employee repository. So now let's check for the info. There is no info, so we need to add info in application properties. So here we need to write that property with the prefix info, then we can get any name. Here I give the app.name, app.description, and app.version. So let's relaunch and refresh. Yeah, we got the app name and description versions in the info endpoint. Okay, now let's try for the mappings. Okay, let's check for our employee controller related mappings, like get info, get all employees, and add employees, all those. Here you can see get employees API, the pattern, and it produces what it produces, everything about our endpoints which we have created in the employee controller.java file. Okay, now let's check for another endpoint, metrics. Here you can see all those different metrics related to the JDBC and Tomcat. You can check that one. And env means environmental. You can see the server which is running port number 8080, and we can get that Java path also from this env path, environmental variables path. Okay, now let's check for the HTTP trace path, so that we can check what are the HTTP requests are generated for our application. Now HTTP trace, it's showing a null page, 404 error is showing. So why HTTP trace is not working? So by default HTTP traces are disabled because it consumes a much memory without the user knowing. So that's the reason it's disabled. So we need to enable it manually by specifying the bean, by creating the bean of in-memory HTTP trace repository. So let's create one configuration file. In that we will return a bean of type in-memory HTTP trace repository. So I am created one file HTTP trace config file. So let's annotate with the that configuration annotation, so that which will return a bean. I paste up which returns a in-memory HTTP trace repository. Now import the configuration. Now save and relaunch our application. Now it's restarted. Now here you can check the HTTP trace endpoint. Now we got the HTTP trace. Now let's verify that HTTP trace is working or not. So I'm trying to hit one endpoint by using this API tester extension. So I'm hitting the add employee API. So I added one employee. Now let's verify that employee API is needed or not. Here you can see that API timestamp at time which that request was made, content length, and you can see that content type and the response status 200, and everything about that HTTP request and response we can get from there. Now let's add one custom endpoint to our application. So I'm creating one class custom endpoint. So here I will annotate it with @component annotation and @endpoint. Here we need to specify the ID, that means endpoint name. ID is equal to my endpoint, and I will give the one. I will create one method which will handle that endpoint. Okay, I will add return. This is from the custom endpoint. I need to annotate it with the read operation. So here you can see the annotation for mapping the web request for reading the content. So now let's relaunch. Now let's verify that custom endpoint. Open and refresh the actuator. Here you can see my endpoint. We got the information from our custom endpoint. Here I used a read operation. You can use write operation, put operation, delete operation, and also you can pass the path variables parameters also. So you can refer the document and the GitHub link in the description.